All right, so today we're diving into something a little different, sound a little bit out there.
Right.
Waking up at 4:30 in the morning.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at the 4:30 a.m. revolution, mastering mornings for success. And I know what you might be thinking, is this just another one of those like productivity fads?
Right.
Or could there be something really beneficial about joining this 4:30 a.m. club?
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to unpack the claims that are made in this podcast, see if maybe the benefits outweigh the drawbacks,
Okay.
and ultimately help you decide if this is something you even want to try.
Yeah.
And trust me, the podcast highlights some pretty intriguing people who swear by this routine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're talking Oprah Winfrey, Tim Cook, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson,
Okay.
like people with wildly different lives and goals.
Yeah, that's fascinating how this early wake-up call seems to resonate with people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
The core argument is that those pre-dawn hours offer this like unique window of uninterrupted time, a chance to really focus on personal growth and achievement before the rest of the world kind of demands your attention.
Yeah, and the podcast really emphasizes how small habits can lead to big results.
Mm-hmm.
And one that really caught my attention was the one alarm method.
Okay.
I have to admit, I am a chronic snooze button hitter.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea of training my brain to respond to just a single alarm is very intriguing.
Interesting.
Could this be a game changer for people like me?
I think it very well could be.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Hitting that snooze button,
Huh.
it actually teaches your brain that alarms are negotiable.
Oh.
You're essentially starting your day with procrastination.
Right.
But the one alarm method, it aims to rewire that response.
Okay.
You delete all those extra alarms.
Mm-mm.
You start by setting your alarm for just 1 minute.
Wow.
When it goes off, you jump out of bed,
Oh my gosh.
turn on the lights, do whatever it takes to get your body moving.
Yeah.
And eventually your brain starts associating that alarm sound with immediate action, not hitting snooze.
That's pretty clever, actually. Yeah.
It's like a little mental boot camp for waking up.
Exactly.
But even if you conquer the morning isn't getting to sleep earlier, a huge part of the challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
I am definitely guilty of those late night Netflix binges.
Yeah, and the podcast acknowledges that they suggest shifting your bedtime and wake-up time gradually,
Okay.
just 15 minutes earlier each day.
Okay.
No drastic overhauls,
Yeah.
which can be overwhelming.
Right.
And they stress the importance of a good evening routine.
Okay.
No screens before bed. Instead, opt for calming activities like reading or journaling.
I've heard that about the blue light from
Yeah.
screens. It's tough to resist though sometimes.
It is, but imagine this. You wake up at 4:30 a.m.
Okay.
The world is still quiet.
Yeah.
Your cortisol levels are naturally rising, giving you a boost of energy and focus before all the distractions of the day hit.
Right.
You've already had some time for yourself, maybe a workout, maybe some quiet reflection.
Yep.
How do you think that would set the tone for your day?
That sounds pretty idyllic, I have to admit.
But what about those of us who are night owls?
Mm.
Are we just doomed to miss out on all these benefits?
Not necessarily. It's true that some people have a natural predisposition to being early birds, but others, the so-called night owls, they have different chronotype,
Okay.
meaning their natural sleep-wake cycle is shifted later.
Okay.
The key is to experiment and find what works best for you.
Mm.
It might not be 4:30 a.m. sharp, but even shifting your wake-up time by an hour earlier could make a difference.
So it's more about prioritizing sleep quality and finding a schedule that allows you to feel rested and energized,
Exactly.
regardless of the exact hour you wake up.
Now, while the podcast focuses on the positives,
Yeah.
we should also address the potential downsides of waking up early,
Okay.
especially for those who aren't naturally inclined to do so.
Right. Because let's be realistic.
Yeah.
What happens when your friends want to go out for a late dinner or you're just not feeling up to jumping out of bed at the crack of dawn?
Yeah.
Could this kind of lifestyle end up being isolating or unsustainable?
Those are valid concerns, and the podcast does touch on them,
Okay.
suggesting strategies for navigating those challenges.
Okay.
We'll dive deeper into those later, but first, I think it's important to understand the science behind why early rising can be so beneficial.
Okay.
We've mentioned cortisol, but there's also the fascinating interplay of sleep cycles and how those early hours can impact our creativity and stress levels.
Okay. I'm all ears. Tell me more about that.
Well, as you sleep, your brain cycles through different stages.
Right.
And it turns out the early morning hours are prime time for REM sleep,
Okay.
which is when we do a lot of our dreaming and memory consolidation. Waking up during this phase can leave you feeling more alert and creative.
That's interesting. So it's not just about having more hours in the day,
Right.
but about tapping into a specific mental state
Yeah,
that's conducive to certain types of work or activities.
exactly. And then there's the impact on stress levels.
Okay.
The world is generally quieter in those early hours,
Right.
which can help reduce cortisol, the stress hormone.
So it's like a double whammy,
Yeah,
boosting energy and focus while minimizing stress.
exactly.
That sounds pretty appealing even for a night owl like me.
Yeah.
But what about those other healthy habits we always hear about, like exercise and diet?
Mm-hmm.
How do they fit into all of this?
They play a crucial role.
Okay.
The podcast emphasizes that regular exercise can help you fall asleep faster and improve sleep quality. And what's interesting is they suggest eating earlier in the evening.
Really?
Apparently, late-night eating can interfere with sleep because your body is busy digesting instead of resting.
That makes sense. I know I've definitely had trouble sleeping after a big meal late at night.
Right.
So we're seeing a pattern here, right? It's
Yeah.
not just about waking up early.
Hmm.
It's about creating a holistic approach to well-being that prioritizes sleep quality and incorporates healthy habits throughout the day.
Exactly. It's all these pieces of the puzzle fitting together.
Yeah, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's go back to those inspiring individuals we mentioned earlier. Oprah Winfrey, Tim Cook, Dwayne Johnson.
Right?
They all have incredibly demanding schedules, yet they prioritize waking up early.
Yeah.
What can we learn from their routines?
That's a great question. What's fascinating is that their routines, while all centered around an early wake-up time, are quite different.
Okay.
Oprah, for example, starts her day with meditation and a gratitude practice.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Cook is known for hitting the gym before most people have even had their coffee.
Wow.
And Dwayne Johnson focuses on a high-protein breakfast and a rigorous workout.
It's pretty motivating to see how they've each tailored this early rising philosophy to their own lives and goals.
Yeah.
It shows that this isn't just a CEO thing or a
Yeah.
celebrity thing. It's something that can work for anyone. But what stood out to you the most from their examples?
I think what's fascinating is how they all emphasize the importance of consistency.
Okay.
Tim Cook, for example,
Mhm.
sticks to his 3.45 a.m. wake-up time even on weekends.
Oh my.
It speaks to the power of creating a routine that supports your goals regardless of external circumstances.
Wow. That's some serious dedication.
Yeah.
I admire his commitment, but I wonder if that's realistic or even healthy for everyone. Is there a risk of burnout if we push ourselves too hard?
That's an important question,
Yeah.
and one we'll definitely delve into further
Okay.
as we continue exploring this 4:30 a.m. phenomenon.
Right.
Remember, it's about finding what works best for you,
Right.
not about forcing yourself into a mold that doesn't fit.
I think that's a great point to pause for. Now we've covered a lot of ground, from the science of sleep to the potential benefits and challenges of waking up early.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I want to hear your thoughts.
Uh-huh.
What stood out to you so far?
For me, it's the idea that early rising isn't just about productivity,
Mm-hmm.
but about reclaiming those precious hours for ourselves, for personal growth,
Yeah.
for self-care. It's about creating a space where we can connect with our inner selves before the demands of the day take over.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's not just about getting ahead, but about nurturing our souls. And I think that's something we can all benefit from, whether we're aiming for a 4:30 a.m. wake up or simply trying to find a little more peace and purpose in our daily lives.
Absolutely.
You know, it's funny to think about how the perception of early rising has changed over time. Like, it wasn't always about productivity hacks and self-improvement.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For centuries, waking up early was simply a necessity for most people.
Right.
Farmers had to tend to their fields. Blacksmiths had to get their forges going.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm of life was dictated by the sun, not by some desire to optimize your morning routine.
Yeah, it was about practicality and survival,
Exactly.
not necessarily squeezing in a meditation session before sunrise.
Precisely. It's fascinating how with the rise of industrialization and technology, we've gained more control over our schedules.
Right.
The ability to choose when we wake up is a relatively modern luxury.
So in a way, this whole idea of early rising as a tool for personal growth is a modern invention.
In many ways, yes, but that's not to say it's any less valuable. What's shifted is our understanding of the potential benefits of those early hours.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just being about getting a head start on work, it's become about creating space for personal growth, self-care, and even tapping into our creativity.
Yeah, it's like we've reclaimed those early hours and repurposed them for our own individual goals and aspirations.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, I was reading an article about how some companies are starting to embrace flexible work schedules that cater to early risers.
Oh, interesting.
It seems like there's a growing recognition that productivity isn't necessarily tied to traditional 9 to 5 work hours.
That's a really interesting development.
Yeah.
It suggests that the traditional model of work is evolving,
Yeah,
and companies are starting to understand that people might have different peak performance times.
exactly. And I think it speaks to the broader conversation around work-life balance and the importance of creating a schedule that aligns with our individual needs and preferences.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works best for you, whether that means starting your workday at 6 a.m. or 10 a.m.
Right.
As long as you're able to focus, produce quality work, and maintain a healthy lifestyle, the exact hour you start might be less important.
So it seems like this 4:30 a.m. phenomenon is just one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that involves understanding our own chronotypes, rethinking traditional work structures, and prioritizing our overall well-being.
I think that's a brilliant way to put it. It's about creating a lifestyle that allows us to thrive both personally and professionally.
Right.
And that might mean waking up early, but it could also mean embracing a later start to the day or finding a flexible schedule that allows for both focused work and time for personal pursuits.
The key takeaway here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What matters is finding what works best for you and allows you to achieve your goals without sacrificing your health and well-being. Now, I'm curious, have you ever experimented with an early wake-up routine yourself?
You know, I wouldn't say I'm a natural early bird, but I was curious to see how it would impact my productivity and overall well-being.
What did you discover? Did you find yourself suddenly churning out groundbreaking research before sunrise?
Not quite, but I did find that those early hours offered a unique sense of calm and focus.
Okay.
The world was still asleep, and I could dedicate my attention to tasks that often got pushed aside during the busyness of the day.
So you experienced some of those benefits we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The increased focus and creativity that come with having that uninterrupted time to yourself.
Exactly. And while I wouldn't say I'm a full-fledged member of the 4:30 a.m. club, I did gain a newfound appreciation for the power of starting the day intentionally, even if it means just waking up a little earlier than usual.
It's like a mini reset for your mind and body,
Yeah.
giving you a chance to prioritize your own needs before the demands of the day take over.
That's a great way to put it, and I think that's a valuable lesson for everyone, regardless of whether they choose to embrace an early wake-up time or not. It's about being mindful of how we structure our days and making conscious choices that support our overall well-being.
That's such an important point. It's not about forcing ourselves into a mold that doesn't fit, but rather about finding ways to optimize our schedules to align with our personal rhythms and goals. So as we continue this deep dive into the 4:30 a.m. phenomenon, let's shift our focus to some of the potential downsides and challenges that we haven't fully addressed yet. You mentioned earlier that the podcast offers strategies for navigating these issues.
Right.
What are some of the things people should be aware of before they jump headfirst into this lifestyle?
One of the biggest challenges, especially for those who aren't natural early birds, is the potential for social isolation.
Okay.
If you're going to bed at 8:30 p.m. to wake up at 4:30 a.m., it can be difficult to maintain a social life that involves late dinners or evening events.
That's a really good point. I can see how that could lead to feelings of loneliness or frustration, especially if your friends and family aren't on the same schedule.
Exactly. And then there's the risk of burnout. Even if you love waking up early, if you're not getting enough sleep overall, it can lead to exhaustion, irritability, and even health problems down the road.
So it's not just about shifting your schedule, it's about making sure you're still prioritizing sleep quality and getting enough rest to support your overall well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that might mean adjusting your wake-up time or being more flexible with your schedule on certain days.
Okay.
The key is to listen to your body and not push yourself beyond your limits.
What about people who work night shifts or have irregular schedules? Is this early rising thing even a possibility for them?
That's a great question. And it's important to acknowledge that the 4:30 a.m. approach might not be feasible for everyone.
Right.
For people with demanding work schedules or family obligations, it might simply not be realistic to adhere to a rigid early morning routine.
So it's about finding a balance that works within the constraints of your individual circumstances.
It's exactly. The podcast even stresses that it's not about becoming a slave to the clock, but rather about using this philosophy as a framework for creating a more intentional and fulfilling life.
That makes sense. It's about finding what empowers you, not about adding unnecessary pressure or stress.
Precisely. And the
Yep.
podcast offers some practical tips for navigating these challenges. One of the most important is communication.
Okay.
If you're struggling to balance your early morning routine with your social life, talk to your friends and family. Explain why this is important to you and see if you can find alternative ways to connect that don't involve late nights.
That's great advice. It's about being proactive and finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
Another tip is to be flexible. If you have a late night out planned, it's okay to adjust your schedule and sleep in a bit the next morning. This isn't about becoming a robot. It's about finding what works best for you and allows you to thrive.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between discipline and flexibility, between honoring your commitments to yourself and being realistic about the demands of your life.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to experiment and adjust your routine as needed. What matters is that you're making conscious choices that support your overall well-being.
I think that's a really empowering message. It's not about adhering to a rigid set of rules, but rather about finding what works best for you and allows you to live your best life. But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on one more thing. We've talked about the potential benefits of early rising for work and personal growth.
Right.
But what about the impact on our relationships? Could waking up early actually improve our connections with others?
That's an interesting question. I hadn't really considered the impact on relationships.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that having that extra time and mental clarity could spill over into how we interact with others.
You know, the source material actually touches on this.
Oh, really?
It highlights how those quiet early hours can be incredibly valuable for nurturing not just ourselves, but our relationships as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. I'm all ears.
Yeah.
Well, the podcast host talks about how some people use that early morning time to connect with loved ones in different time zones. Maybe write a heartfelt letter or simply reflect on their relationships and how they can be more present and attentive.
I love that it's like creating a space for intentionality,
Mhm.
not just in our own lives,
Right.
but in how we show up for the people we care about.
Exactly. And think about it. When you start your day feeling calm and centered, you're more likely to bring that energy into your interactions with others.
Yeah.
You're more patient, more understanding, more likely to listen and connect on a deeper level.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like those early morning hours become a ripple effect,
Yeah.
positively impacting not just our own well-being, but also the quality of our relationships.
Precisely. It's not just about productivity or self-improvement. It's about cultivating a mindset that allows us to be our best selves in all areas of our lives,
Yeah.
including our relationships.
So it seems like this 4:30 a.m. phenomenon is about so much more than just waking up early. It's about creating a space for personal growth, self-care, and even strengthening our connections with others.
It's about taking control of our day and using those early hours to set a positive tone for everything that follows.
I think that's a really powerful message, and it's inspiring to think that something as simple as shifting our wake-up time could have such a profound impact on our lives.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not about forcing ourselves into a rigid schedule,
Right.
but rather about experimenting and finding what works best for you.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where we feel rested, energized, and ready to embrace all that life has to offer.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 4:30 a.m. phenomenon, I'm going to leave you with this thought. What if instead of seeing it as a challenge,
Yeah.
we see it as an opportunity? An opportunity to connect with ourselves, to nurture our relationships, and to create a life that feels both fulfilling and meaningful.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. It's not about deprivation or pushing ourselves beyond our limits. It's about embracing a new way of being, a way that prioritizes intentionality, self-care, and connection.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even discover that those early morning hours hold a certain magic, a sense of peace and possibility that you never knew existed.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Yeah.
We've explored the ins and outs of the 4:30 a.m. phenomenon,
Yeah.
from the science behind it to the potential benefits and challenges, and even some tips for making it work for you.
We've learned that it's not a magic bullet,
Right.
but rather a tool that can be used to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
A huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes.
We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking.
And we encourage you to continue exploring this topic, experimenting with your own routines, and discovering what works best for you.
Remember, it's not about conforming to a rigid schedule, but rather about finding what empowers you to live your best life.
So until next time, keep those minds curious, those hearts open, and those alarm clocks set or not.
Sleep well, everyone.